sort of thing. And so we started building various dimmers and color organs, dimmers that worked with the music, and then decided we would start our own company, and we called it J&S Research Electronics, a very high and mighty name. But basically it was based there in the boat shed, was our registered office. And Roger Foley actually soon suggested that a much better name is Jans, for J for Jackson, A-N-D, and S for Story. So that was the beginning of Jans. And it wasn't long before, I think we were 18 at the time, maybe even 17. But it wasn't long before we moved to some premises in Rose Bay above a shop. And that's where we actually started manufacturing stuff. We had to teach ourselves. We actually got friendly with a guy from Philips who gave these two kids an account, which was the beginning of us getting accounts with a bunch of different manufacturers. And we would design the printed circuit boards and actually build the printed circuit boards and actually dump the really nasty chemicals down the drain.
Nice, into Sydney Harbour.
Into Sydney Harbour, probably.
And they're still there, I assume, somewhere.
Probably.
In the sandbank.
And so we developed a bunch of lighting equipment and dimmers, which we eventually licensed to Strand. And so in addition to the manufacturing side of making these guitar amps and little PA column type PAs and that sort of thing, we also started up a rental division. And we used to work with the cheesy clubs up in King's Cross and do balls, and we had strobe lights which we used to build, and fog machines, and we would do these light shows, and actually we'd run around with the one fog machine and fog out all these different places during the Saturday night. And so it was the rental side of things that really started to pay for everything, and soon, just a couple of kids, we actually had a pretty thriving little business. And then as things go with partners, we didn't particularly disagree, so oh yeah, here was our little production line. There's some color organs on the left and some strobe lights on the right, and that's there in Rose Bay. Yep. So we parted ways. In fact, it was so then the guys that own Jans now, actually 4 of them stepped in and bought the business from us, and then I moved on to do a big lighting installation up in Brisbane, where I put a whole bunch of changing coloured lights in, and then I decided I was going to travel to the US. So
But can you tell me the story about because you'd been mixing Johnny Cash or something, was that right?
Oh, okay. So back then, PAs in Australia were pretty much just columns with a bunch of 12-inch speakers, and it really wasn't very sophisticated. And then the very Clare Brothers came into town, very, very small Clare Brothers. I think they were doing maybe $160,000 a year as the overall business. Clare Brothers obviously since grown to the biggest audio company in the world and have offices all around the place, but back then they were very small, and they had come into town to do a show at Randwick Racecourse, an outdoor show with Blood, Sweat and Tears. And a friend and I knew our way, or at least I knew the way in over the back fence from having done stuff there before.
Nice.
And so we got ourselves a free ticket, essentially by climbing the fence, and ended up going up, and I was amazed with the sound compared to what we'd been building, and all of a sudden we had these big three-way systems, and it was actually using multi-cell horns, which you'd never even see today, and these W bends for the bass. It wasn't sub, it was just the bass then, which is an enormous folded horn. And so I ended up going up and having a chat with Roy Clare, who was actually on the tour. And
he wasn't mixing though, was he?
No. Actually, the guy mixing was Bill Motzing, who right now teaches in the conservatory here in Sydney. And he was actually going to join the band as a trombone player, but actually ended up becoming the sound engineer.
Right.
And then years
Blood,
later,
Sweat and Tears.
yeah, we're on tour with this with blood, sweat, and tears, and I was telling him how great Australia is and how my partner and I started a business when we were just 18, and it's the land of opportunity. So he packed up and moved his family to Australia.
Oh, really? And then
And-
you proceeded to pack up and move to America?
Yeah, I packed up and moved to America. Roy had something coming up with Johnny Cash in Australia in maybe 69, 70. And he said, can I leave the gear with you? So I said, of course, very happy to do it. And so I ended up actually doing the tour. And that was my first taste of the big time. I'd done smaller shows around town before with our little column PAs, but this was my introduction into the big time.
Right.
And so did the Johnny Cash tour, and then I was on my way to England, as all Australians did back then, and Roy Clare had said stop off in America. So I went via New York and found my way down to Lititz, Pennsylvania, which is where Clare Brothers are based. It's out in the middle of nowhere. It's, I don't know if you've seen the Pennsylvania Dutch with their horse and buggies, and they kind of live the real retro life, no electricity. And so that they're right in that area. In fact, you've got to be careful when you're driving along that you don't run down one of these horse and
Attention
buggies.
visitors, for those people who wanted to attend the rigging seminar, that will be
We'll wait for
taking
this to
place
end.
at the back of the Horton Pavilion in room 1 in
Should we go to that?
10 minutes.
Yeah,
The rigging
let's go.
seminar is free to all
Let's
who
go.
would like to attend. Thank you.
So I, coming from Australia and being very green, was pretty impressed. We didn't have FM radio at the time, and there at the shop, it was built in an old barn. They had FM and had a really nice kind of vibe. And so Clare Brothers, most things were regional. It was unusual that Roy was over in Australia doing a tour. And so when things would come through a particular region, a particular sound company would do it. For instance, it would be Clare Brothers in the East Coast, and then Showcode down in the Texas area, and a whole variety of other little sound companies. And some of those sound companies grew to be big sound companies when it became the norm to tour the world, and some went away. Around that time, Elvis Presley had started touring again, and a lot of this stuff's like a big deal later on, but at the time, you're just going out and you're working. And he was playing Madison Square Garden. I took a picture here. He's I don't know whether I'm getting the evil eye or not, but
I think you are, actually.
So I was lucky enough to mix a bunch of these shows and be on the sound company doing that particular area. And what was different was back then, his manager, Colonel Parker, wanted to sell every seat in the house. And so that required us not doing what we normally did, which was stack a bunch of PA on each side of the stage and hope that it would cover the whole arena. We were required to hang. So all the different sound companies were doing their own take on what it takes to hang it. Stan Miller from Stanell, he used to hang it from 1/4-inch aircraft cable, which used to scare me because it was like the margin for the safety margin was pretty much reduced.
Is
But,
this an Elvis hang?
yeah, this is embarrassing when you look back at this stuff. It's just basically a bunch of junk hanging up there. And how
The
we
flying
ever did
junkyard, as you
Yeah.
once called it.
Yeah, I don't know how we ever managed. So this was actually built by a farmer.
That looks like it used to be a plough by the looks of that.
Who made harvesting machines. The guy was brilliant.
Yeah, he was. That harvesting machine.
It looks kind of like a harvesting machine, but he had potato harvesters and all this
That's
other
it
sort of
there,
stuff.
isn't
His
it?
name was Wilbur Grable. And but what happened, it was woefully inadequate. So we were the first to use the CM chain hoists.
And that's it.
Yeah,
Above there, is it?
sitting up on top there,
Yep.
which is now, like a show I did a few years ago, we had, I think, 140 of those points, and we were hanging the whole world from one. And originally it was a 1 ton, and it would actually go up, and then the brake wouldn't work quite properly. It would run backwards just a little bit, and then stuff.
Nice.
So that hadn't been used before on the sound side, except for the ice show, and they had this very basic rig that was some lights and some sound that they would hang up. And the trick is you have to turn the contactor upside down because the gravity doesn't let it work properly. And so
So this was literally the first
yeah, that was the
flown
first.
PA.
Yeah. And so, as I said, that PA was woefully inadequate and it really wasn't distributed the right way. We didn't really play in the round, we played more to one end, and the PA was pretty symmetrical.
And was this the
didn't
only
last-
one? Were there two
Yeah,
of these, or
no,
was there just
this
one?
was the only one, thank God. Yeah, we got rid of this pretty quickly. But it was their community light and sound Leviathans is what the horns are called, and it's actually and then the JBL long throws underneath it. So this is just one in an evolution of these hanging techniques. So we had to kind of master this hanging technique in order to sell the maximum number of seats. Back then, the ticket prices were, I think, $7.50, $10, and $12.
Was that a lot?
That was actually reasonable. No, it wasn't expensive. I think Elvis appealed to the masses, and they didn't really want to gouge.
But I thought Colonel was, obsessed with money.
Well, he would do like it in concessions and stuff like that.
Right.
And yeah, they'd have scarves and there was a whole energy.
Merchandise.
The merchandising was the big
Yeah,
deal.
right.
In fact, we would fly into the next town, and he'd be there meeting us to see how the merchandising did and collect the cash.
Right.
So, and we would actually, I don't know if you've got the picture there, but we would actually, unbeknownst to him, pull out the cash, big stacks of cash, and we'd play cards on the plane. And
And it was winner take all.
yeah, I wish.